Hi, welcome. Enjoy the content. Subscribe and turn on notifications. Sir, your name isn't on the guest list. The security guard said it politely, but the look on my wife's face wasn't polite at all. It was pure embarrassment. Pure disgust. Standing beside her in a tailored tuxedo, one hand resting on the small of her back like he already owned her, was her boss, Daniel Mercer, the CEO of Blackstone Capital's regional division. My wife's voice came out cold, sharp, and louder than it needed to be. He's not supposed to be here. A few people near the ballroom entrance turned to look at us. Crystal chandeliers glowed overhead. Cameras flashed. A violin quartet played somewhere behind the gold-trimmed doors. It was supposed to be the biggest corporate charity gala of the year. And there I was, being treated like I was some drunk stranger who had wandered in off the street. Daniel gave me a slow smile. The kind men wear when they think they've already won. "I think it's best if you leave, Evan," he said. "You're making Claire uncomfortable." Claire, my wife of 6 years. She wouldn't meet my eyes. I still remember the exact second something inside me went quiet. Not broken. Not shattered. Quiet. Because in that moment, standing there in the same black suit she once told me looked too simple for serious rooms, I realized two things. First, my wife was sleeping with her boss. Second, neither of them had the slightest idea who they had just thrown out of the building. I looked at the guard and nodded. No problem. Claire finally glanced at me then, probably expecting a scene. Begging for one, maybe. Something messy she could use later to paint me as unstable, jealous, beneath her. But I just smiled. Not at her. At the timing. Then I turned around and walked out through the front doors of the Langford Hotel, while behind me my wife exhaled in relief, and Daniel Mercer probably felt 10 feet tall. 22 minutes later, I walked back in through the private executive entrance. And this time, the entire ballroom stood up. But to understand why, I need to back up. My name is Evan Cross. I'm 38 years old, and for most of my adult life, I learned one lesson early. The moment people know your title, they stop showing you who they really are. My grandfather built Crosshale Holdings from almost nothing. My father expanded it. By the time it reached me, it wasn't just one company. It was an investment group with controlling interests in logistics, real estate, energy, hospitality, and finance. Quiet money. Old money. The kind that doesn't need to announce itself. I never liked attention, so I stayed out of the press and away from the public-facing side of the business. I worked internally, governance, acquisitions, restructuring, risk control. 3 months before that gala, I'd been formally appointed vice chairman of the group after my father's health took a turn. Only a handful of people outside the board knew. That secrecy wasn't just personal preference. We had concerns about Blackstone Capital, one of our subsidiaries. Too many irregular expenses. Too much executive churn. Too many internal complaints disappearing before they became formal reports. Daniel Mercer, the Golden Boy CEO, was one of the names that kept coming up. So I stayed quiet. And at home, I stayed even quieter. When Claire met me, I wasn't wearing a title. I was just Evan. We met at a bookstore cafe downtown. She laughed at one of my terrible jokes, and by the end of the night, we'd missed closing time. Back then, she was warm, funny, ambitious in a way that felt alive instead of ruthless. She used to say she loved how calm I was. How safe I felt. In those early years, I told her I worked in corporate governance for my family's holding group. Which was true. But I never unpacked the scale of it, partly because I wanted one part of my life that wasn't about influence, and partly because she never really asked. She was more interested in where we were going than where I came from. At first, that was fine. Then she joined Blackstone. Her promotions came fast. So did the wardrobe changes, the late nights, the networking dinners, the language. Everything became about optics. About rooms that mattered. About important people. About how I didn't understand the game. The first warning sign wasn't infidelity. It was contempt. She started correcting me in public. Mocking my clothes. Rolling her eyes when I said I'd rather stay home than attend some forced cocktail event. She told friends I was comfortable but not exactly driven. She said it jokingly, but always after checking who was listening. Then came Daniel Mercer. At first he was just my boss. Then, Daniel says. Then, Daniel thinks. Then, Daniel invited the team. Then, Daniel really sees my potential. I heard his name so often it started sounding like a third person in our marriage. One night she came home just after midnight smelling like hotel perfume and expensive whiskey, neither of which were hers. She went straight to the shower and left her phone face down on the dresser. Claire never left her phone unattended. That's the thing about suspicion. It doesn't explode all at once. It accumulates. A look here. A lie there. A sudden password change. A little too much defensiveness over a question that should have had a simple answer. I didn't touch her phone that night. I waited. 2 weeks later, I got the proof. Claire was asleep on the couch, still in her work dress, one heel half off. Her phone lit up on the coffee table. Daniel, tonight was worth every risk. Seeing him in that cheap jacket while you sat beside me was almost cruel. Then another message. Daniel, Friday will be easier. Tell your husband the gala is +1 restricted. I want you arriving with me. I read those 2 messages 3 times. I wish I could tell you I felt rage. I didn't. Not at first. I felt humiliation. Then I felt stupid. Then slowly I felt cold. I unlocked the phone with the code I had known for years. What I found was enough to end a marriage and a career in the same hour. Photos. Hotel confirmations disguised as conference bookings. Messages mocking me, my habits, my small life. Daniel promising Claire a senior strategy role once, dead weight at home, was gone. Claire telling him I was too ordinary to suspect anything. Too ordinary. That part almost made me laugh. I documented everything. Screenshots to an encrypted drive. Dates. Account records. Cross-referenced travel reimbursements. I checked the expense reports coming through Blackstone. Daniel had been billing personal hotel stays and gifts through client entertainment accounts. Worse, there were payments tied to a shell vendor that looped back to someone in his inner circle. Infidelity was one thing. Fraud was another. The next morning, I called 2 people, my attorney and our internal audit chair. I said very little. I didn't need to say much. Evidence speaks best when emotion gets out of the way. Over the next 10 days, I moved carefully. I separated personal funds, changed beneficiaries, secured property records, copied every relevant file. My attorney prepared the divorce petition but held it. Internal audit quietly coordinated with the board's ethics committee. Daniel, meanwhile, kept preparing for the charity gala, where he was set to headline a major expansion initiative. He thought that night would crown him. He had no idea the board had already changed the program. Claire got more arrogant as the gala approached. She told me I wouldn't like it anyway. It's not really your world, she said while adjusting diamond earrings I was fairly sure Daniel had paid for. I looked at her in the mirror and asked, "Are you going with your team?" She didn't blink. Yes. That was the final lie she told me in my house. The night of the gala, she left an hour before I did. She wore silver. The dress I once bought her for our anniversary sat untouched in the back of her closet. I arrived through the main entrance on purpose. Not in a limousine. Not with an entourage. Alone. I wanted to see how far they'd go when they thought there would be no consequences. Now you know why I didn't resist when they had me escorted out. Because by then, I didn't need the front entrance. Through the private executive entrance, the hotel's general manager greeted me by name and looked pale enough to faint. He had just been informed who I was. He apologized 3 times on the elevator ride up to the executive lounge. "It's fine," I told him. "Just make sure the program runs exactly as updated." When I stepped backstage, the board chair, Marianne Hale, handed me the revised remarks. "Audit team is in place," she said quietly. "Legal too." Through a gap in the curtain, I could see Claire at Daniel's table near the front. She was glowing, relaxed, certain. Then the MC walked to center stage. "Ladies and gentlemen, before Mr. Mercer presents the Blackstone expansion vision, we are honored to welcome the newly appointed vice chairman of Crosshale Holdings." The pause. Then my name. Mr. Evan Cross. You could feel the room shift before I even stepped into the light. Conversations died. Glasses froze halfway to lips. Daniel's face drained of color so fast it was almost unreal. Claire didn't just look shocked. She looked like the floor had vanished underneath her. I walked to the podium, buttoned my jacket, and let the silence work for me. "Good evening," I said. "I apologize for entering twice. The first time, there seemed to be some confusion about whether I belonged here." A ripple moved through the room. Not laughter. Recognition. I looked directly at Daniel. Thankfully, access issues have now been resolved. Claire's hand flew from Daniel's arm like she'd touched fire. I continued, calm and measured. "As many of you know, Crosshale has been conducting an internal review of leadership practices and financial controls inside Blackstone Capital. That review is no longer preliminary." Daniel stood up. "This is inappropriate." Marian didn't even raise her voice. "Sit down, Mr. Mercer." He sat. I opened the folder in front of me. Over the past several weeks, evidence has been verified involving misuse of company funds, falsified expense classifications, undisclosed conflicts of interest, and violations of executive conduct policy. The room had gone so silent I could hear cutlery settling against porcelain. Then I said the part that wasn't in the written remarks. "And on a personal note, I'd like to thank the individuals who made this investigation especially easy by being careless, arrogant, and convinced the people around them were too small to matter." Claire's eyes filled instantly. Not with remorse. With fear. I didn't humiliate her with details. I didn't need to. The board already had the evidence. Security was already moving toward Daniel. Legal counsel was already waiting in the side corridor. Daniel tried once more. "You can't do this over gossip and—" "Hotel receipts billed to donor relations aren't gossip," I said. "Neither are wire transfers routed through Halpern Consulting. Neither are your messages." That was it. He stopped talking. Claire stood up then, trembling. "Evan, please." That word. Please. After weeks of lies, after months of contempt, after standing at the door while they threw me out like I was nothing. I looked at her the way you look at a room you've already decided to leave behind. "I know," I said quietly. "That's why I'm done." I stepped away from the podium, and the rest unfolded without drama. Daniel was removed before dessert. Claire tried to follow me backstage, but my attorney met her instead and handed her an envelope. She knew what was inside before she opened it. The divorce moved quickly after that. Infidelity mattered, but the financial documentation mattered more. She had accepted gifts purchased with misused corporate funds. She lost her role within the week. Several friends disappeared from her life right after the press release went out about the executive investigation. Funny how loyalty works when invitations stop coming. Daniel was terminated for cause. Civil action followed. Then regulatory review. As for Claire, she called me for months. First angry. Then pleading. Then nostalgic, as if she could rewrite the story by remembering better parts of it. I didn't answer. Peace came back slowly. Not in one grand moment. In ordinary ones. Making coffee in a quiet kitchen. Sleeping without wondering who was lying to me. Taking a weekend trip without checking someone else's tone. Realizing I no longer had to prove my worth to a person who only respected titles she could show off in public. That gala night didn't ruin me. It revealed everyone clearly. And in the end, that was the real gift. They thought they were throwing out an embarrassing husband. What they actually did was expose themselves in front of the one man in the room who could end both of their illusions with a single introduction. I didn't win because I was richer, or more powerful, or better connected. I won because when the truth arrived, I stayed calm long enough to use it. And when I finally walked away, I didn't take revenge with shouting. I took it with silence, timing, and the kind of truth that doesn't need to be repeated twice. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the story, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next one.